Matthew Wyman, who is a senior fellow at Keele University. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us here on the program. Now, we're seeing the resilience of the Ukrainian people, which has somewhat shed light on some of the weaknesses the Russian army has. What did Putin miscalculate? Because according to reports, Russia wanted to take control of the capital shortly after it started its attacks.
Yeah, I think he both miscalculated the strength of his own army and the strength of Ukrainian resistance. So I think as regards his own army, he really fell victim to his own propaganda. So the Russian army had been so successful in, for example, the invasion of Georgia in 2008 or the occupation of Crimea in 2014, that he was led to believe that this would be a very simple task. And clearly it's been far from that. And we've got all kinds of reports about hopeless logistics, soldiers not having enough food, tanks getting stuck in the mud, all sorts of things. Furthermore, I think he also believed his propaganda about Ukraine, that he seemed to think that the Ukrainian people would welcome his soldiers as liberators and they'd be throwing flowers at the tanks, whereas, as we've seen, that he's united Ukraine against the Russian invasion.
Do you think the military assistance Zelensky is getting from the EU and US is enough to take on Russia and its military capacity?
Well, I'm no military expert, but I think all of the military experts fear not. The Russian army is so massive. It's got 800,000 men. So as it were, that they can keep throwing resources at it. But so I think that however long it takes, the balance of the balance of probability has to be that the Russians can eventually occupy Ukraine, and the question would then be, what happens after that?
So what does happen after that?
Judging by the fact that Putin seems to have united the whole Ukrainian people against the invasion, I think we could expect something like an ongoing insurgency, and it's impossible. It's impossible to think of say Putin wants to replace the government, but what can he replace it with that's going to be acceptable to the to the Ukrainian people? It's very difficult to see what that scenario would look like.
Right. Now, the reaction we're getting from companies worldwide pulling their operations out of Russia is quite overwhelming. And this is, without a doubt, going to take a toll on the people of Russia because they're being isolated, which will eventually lead to unrest within the country.
Well, perhaps. Whether it leads to unrest, I think it's really not clear that it would do that. I think we do need to bear in mind that Russia has been operating pretty much as a police state for the last few years. And what you've seen with the protesters on the streets over the last week being rounded up, you might have seen the pictures of the 80-year-old lady, the survivor of the siege of Leningrad, who came out onto the streets of St. Petersburg with anti-war placards and was led off by two policemen who were kind of twice her size. So I think, and furthermore, I think that many Russians, whether they support the war or not, there is this kind of resignation about what's going to happen. So I think it's far from clear that we could expect necessarily any kind of popular protests on a mass scale in Russia. I think that if this is going to be ended on the Russian side, the much more likely scenario is some kind of is some kind of palace coup. Although again, it's very difficult to see which of the senior members of the Russian which senior Kremlin figures could possibly do that. Putin so much surrounded himself by his cronies and yes men.
All right, Matthew Wyman, thank you so much for joining us here on the program and sharing that insight with us.